just one word, well, let that word be kindness. Your kindness.
This is the FlashPoint Television Network.
Welcome to FlashPoint NewsBreak, where the truth lives. Here are today's news stories.
Welcome to NewsBreak. I'm Gene Bailey. The goal of NewsBreak is to bring you the stories from around the globe that affect your life. Let's get started with what's happening.
President Trump says a deal to open the strait and limit Iran's nuclear program is, quote, imminent. Peace talks expected to resume today after he called off another massive round of strikes over the weekend. Trey Ying's live in Tel Aviv on where we are today. Trey, hello.
Yeah, hey, Bill, good morning. President Trump calling off strikes against Iran for now, as he says a deal is close. According to the president, talks will resume today, aimed at finalizing an agreement on the Strait of Hormuz. Trump says he was asked by Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia to hold off as diplomatic efforts play out.
I was asked by Saudi Arabia, by UAE, by Qatar, and by Iran. We're all set to go just about at this time right now, and a massive attack. We're all set to go. But when the allies ask to call it off, we got to say, well, let's see.
Overnight, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian posted to X about the memorandum of understanding that was reached earlier this year, saying in part, quote, I believe this memorandum will be the center of gravity of our foreign relations in the future. We must strive to compel the enemy to remain committed to what it has signed. The security of the country, the region, and our allies will be enhanced by this memorandum. International focus does remain on the Strait of Hormuz, where an explosion was heard this morning by a tanker, according to maritime tracking groups. Reports do indicate a new deal could see the strait open for 60 days without fees. With the possibility of another agreement in sight, the region remains on alert since the Iranians are denying any direct progress.
We currently do not have negotiations with America. The negotiations are with Oman and are focused on reaching an understanding over a path to ensure the security of shipping passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
The Iranians often say one thing publicly to their domestic audience and then something else at the negotiating table. Bill?
All right, Trey. Thanks. Trey Ying's Tel Aviv. Thank you. Dana?
And let's bring in retired General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst. And we know, listening to you, that is exactly what Iran does over and over again. Can I just play one more thing from President Trump from you and for you, and then get your take on how this is going? Watch.
So they asked us, Iran specifically, but the other three said we really, I asked Saudi Arabia, the king, I said, the crown prince, I said, what would you rather do? Would you rather have us do this or not? And they said, we would much prefer a deal as opposed to an attack, because you don't know where these attacks lead. I mean, will they be flooded with people pouring into their country and disaster? A lot of bad things can happen.
All of that taken into account, where do you think the president is today, and where do we end up in a few days from now?
Yeah, well, it's certainly challenging to unpack some of this, given all the players involved. And obviously, the president was on the cusp of going back into major combat operations, so our audience understands that meant that Israel was going to participate. The targets had expanded quite a bit beyond Epic Fury for a couple of reasons. One, we had considerably more intelligence over the last 4 months since the ceasefire on April the 7th. And two, it was a recognition that we had to take down their energy and economic targets, which brought it into a different array of targets to crush this regime once and for all. So where are we now? Well, let's start with President Trump himself. I mean, as noted here, the Iranians have told him something privately that obviously hasn't been disclosed publicly in terms of making a deal. And publicly, they're saying quite something else. They're actually saying there are no negotiations planned for today, which was the day the president said they were going to start. But I'm making the assumption, certainly, that the president has heard something that's different that motivated him to stand down that military attack. And the two issues clearly on the table are the Straits of Hormuz and also a nuclear enterprise. And the Straits of Hormuz, what we're talking about is going back to international navigation waterways prior to the war beginning on February 28th. We're not talking about Oman maintains some level of control and Iran maintains some level of control. That is not what the deal will consist of. The administration's position is go back to where it was prior to February the 28th, recognition of it being international waterways. Nobody has control of it, and nobody has the right to interfere with it.
Go now to the latest on the cyber attacks against the nation's water systems. Sources tell ABC News that water utilities at least 7 states have been hit and that Iran may be linked to the attacks. Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Katersky has the story for us. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning to you, Michael. And the urgent priority this morning is safeguarding the nation's water supplies from what appears to be Iran's quiet escalation of the war. These cyber attacks struck water utilities in at least 7 states. The hackers change passwords, leaving the utilities blind, or they disable alarms, allowing wastewater systems to enter unsafe conditions undetected. And this is exactly what intelligence officials feared would happen from the moment the U.S. began its buildup of forces in the Gulf. Now the FBI is urging utilities to disconnect from the internet or revert to manual controls if automated systems are compromised.
New details are emerging about this weekend's deadly mass shooting at an In-N-Out Burger in Twin Falls, Idaho. At least 3 people were killed in the attack and 7 others were wounded. And the gunman, he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. CBS's Lindsay Reiser is following the investigation and has the very latest tonight. Lindsay.
Jerika, the police chief of Twin Falls called it the most chaotic scene that most of their first responders will ever experience, and that Good Samaritans who jumped into action prevented it from being even worse.
They're running.
Terror in Twin Falls. Police say a shooter sprayed bullets at this In-N-Out Burger in a crowded shopping center 2 hours southeast of Boise.
So far, all we have is a male, 20 to 30 years of age, wearing blue shirt, glasses, and pants.
Police have identified the gunman as 24-year-old Chad Williams. A city spokesperson said Williams also fired shots inside the restaurant that opened just 1 week ago.
What's happening?
What happened?
What's happening?
Shoot. Go. Just go. Go.
In one eyewitness video, a person carrying what appeared to be a firearm could be seen outside the restaurant, opening the door and trunk of a parked sedan. In another, it appears a man shoots at the suspect before ducking from return fire.
We can confirm that there was an off-duty state trooper and a citizen who actively engaged the suspect by returning gunfire towards him. We want to take a moment and commend the actions of the off-duty officer and the citizen and their heroic action to stop this incident. We believe their actions helped drive the suspect away from the scene, preventing further casualties.
Police say 3 people were killed and the gunman took his own life. In-N-Out President Lindsay Snyder posted today that one of their employees was killed, writing, "My heart is broken. We lost one of our beautiful associates tonight. She was taking care of our most important asset, our customers, and her life was taken." Tonight, 7 others are injured, 2 in critical condition. The FBI is investigating, and they've set up a digital tip line for people to submit videos of the shooting.
This morning, entire neighborhoods in Spokane, Washington, gone, vanishing in a matter of hours as intense wind-fueled flames seen here racing from home to home.
There's a car.
Walls of smoke engulfing neighborhoods, the skies turning black and orange. This was a scene over the weekend. The wind and flames so intense, firefighters could not do anything to stop the homes from burning. Instead, they focused on life safety and getting out thousands of residents forced to evacuate.
There wasn't enough rigs with how many fires we had going and how large the fire got, with how quick it was. It was jumping through multiple neighborhoods. Nobody is capable of handling that in this country.
Authorities are calling it the worst natural disaster the region has ever seen. More than 7,000 acres burning.
There are just so many Washingtonians who have literally lost everything in a very, very short period of time. Just in a matter of hours, their lives changed.
Firefighters racing in from several states and as far away as Australia. But overnight, crews on the front lines reporting no containment. Home after home burned to the ground, as we see firsthand.
On the ground here, that's part of the engine of the car that just melted out of it.
There are pieces of the tire and the brakes. Everything melted as the flames went racing through here. Fire commanders say more than 600 structures have been destroyed. Many of them were homes. Residents and their family members are coming back to find what's left.
This used to be, really the most you've ever seen in a house, like a history book. I pulled a Stahlhelm for World War I out of here, but unfortunately, I think everything in here is pretty toast.
But very little is salvageable.
I never in a million years would have ever thought this would happen to me.
I was on the roof. I couldn't see my feet, and I had to feel my way down the ladder because everything just turned black. It was like someone flipped the lights off.
And George, this morning we've seen community members coming through looking for looters. In fact, there's police coming by right now. And during the day, community members and families have been coming in, sifting through these homes, looking for anything salvageable. And there's very little left.
Boy, so much devastation. Okay, Alex, thanks very much.
Could you ever support a self-described socialist candidate?
No.
No way. My God, no.
And even if they have some good ideas?
I support the good ideas, but how could you support some of the crazy stuff they're for? Have you seen their platform? They're for just dismantling everything that we know, whether it be the structure of government, Congress itself, or the Senate they want to get rid of, and then they start talking about all the crazy things.
So my question for you is not what the Democrats should do about this, but how do Republicans get in front of it? What should they be saying? What should they be doing? Are they doing enough now?
Yeah, well, the last time I was at this table, a book came out in which I've stipulated that I think in some respects Republicans have lost their way. But Democrats have lost their minds. I mean, the fact that you have candidates, in Michigan and New Jersey and elsewhere, and of course here in New York, a mayor that openly embraced socialism, openly embraced Marxism. The DSA's platform is a radical communist platform, shutting down the United States Senate, seizing private property. I think Republicans, we have to offer a choice, not an echo. I've been concerned about a trend toward nationalization of American businesses that we've seen, price controls. I think now more than ever, Republicans would do well to articulate that clear, free market, limited government agenda that has defined our party for the last 50 years. All the more important as you see the progressive left overrunning the Democratic Party.
But the point about that clip with Joe Manchin is that for the next 2 years and 4 months minimum, every Democrat running for office is going to be asked the same question. We're going to see how they respond.
This isn't just merch, it's a movement. FlashPoint gear is made for those who won't back down, who stand for truth, faith, and freedom.
Go to the FlashPointStore.com.
From t-shirts and hats to more.
That's where all the new products are. Check it out. You'll be glad you did.
Every piece is designed to speak before you do. Wherever life takes you, wear what you believe. Wear FlashPoint. Order now at FlashPointStore.com. Don't just follow the movement, represent it.
You're repeating it like a parrot. I've actually read the science. You don't want to come back here and debate the science.
I'm not debating this with you.
All you know how to do is repeat things that people told you and say, trust the experts. That's what you did during COVID. Now we know that Anthony Fauci, who was the expert, was lying about everything. He was lying, and you were punishing people for not trusting the experts. And now you're rolling out the experts again to talk about something that you have no personal knowledge of.
So that was pretty hot on CNN Sunday. HHS Secretary Kennedy accusing some media outlets of what he called press malpractice during COVID. That exchange after the release of Dr. Anthony Fauci's personal diaries. They also reveal a private feud with my next guest. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is here. And Governor, good morning to you. You took a very contrarian position during COVID, and that was well known. With the restaurants, the bars, keeping schools open, keeping your state open. Not initially, but a few weeks into it, all right? I don't know where to begin, but I'll start here, okay? On the diaries, August 2021. Besides being a total jerk, he is causing people to die in his home state. 4 days later, Governor DeSantis is a complete disgrace. I'm sure insults don't bother you, but what did you make of how he presented his version of what happened?
Well, to the contrary, I think those are badges of honor to have him attacking me. And he was also doing it publicly, Bill. I mean, I remember early in COVID, I did an order to mandate schools be open. He was attacking us. He would come down to Florida and do hits on local news saying, you know, that we were doing it wrong. He wanted to impose mandates on people at the local level. I blocked those governments from doing it. And you remember he would attack Florida for having our beaches open, for example, or Memorial Day parties that people were doing. And that's what happens in Florida. People go out and enjoy the scenery. But yet he was very quiet when you had those George Floyd protests. He wasn't talking about those people being locked down. He was very mute about it. So to me, it was clear pretty early on, within probably a couple months, that he was practicing political science rather than evidence-based medicine. And what happened, though, and I think RFK was right to call out CNN, the legacy media really imbued him with a certain amount of informal authority that any edict he would issue, that would be put out in every media channel as equating to science. And Fauci even said at one time, I am the science. If you disagree with me, you disagree with science. But wait a minute. Science tells you that a family is not able to operate their restaurant? Of course it doesn't. Science tells you that schools should be indefinitely closed for a virus that had very little impact on young, healthy children? Of course it didn't say that. Science told you that mask mandates would stop COVID? Well, Fauci himself in March of 2020 said the mask wouldn't do it. So the diaries, I think, really validate what I saw early on. This is a guy that was drinking his own Kool-Aid. He was venerated by the media. I think he liked the fact that he had a lot of this informal power when he was issuing these recommendations and telling governors and mayors to do some of the draconian things that were actually done. It had a really negative effect on a lot of societies throughout this country. And I would say we don't want a Fauci Florida. A Fauci city or a Fauci state basically was a dystopia where you had businesses reeling, people's liberties curtailed, and kids left on the sideline unable to access education.
So I'd forgotten about this, but reading it earlier today, I remember it now. He was arguing about a spread. You said it was a cluster, and he wrote in his diary that you were correct about that. He also said you're a Trumper and a real problem. Screw people dying, save the economy. Here is a clip from a podcast, July of 2022. Listen here.
I wonder if you would recommend locking down schools if you had to do it all over again.
Well, you know, again, it's first of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down. You're asking me questions. You're talking about the CDC is the public health agency that uses their epidemiologists and their science-based approach to make recommendations.
Okay, Governor, in your view, is that an accurate representation of what happened?
Absolutely not. And actually, in his diary, he was taking credit for school closures in places like California and New York. He was opposed to Florida. In 2020, I issued an executive order, which the unions opposed. I got sued over, but basically mandating all public schools be open. We told parents, if you want to do virtual, that's fine, but every kid that wants to be there, the parents that want them there, they have a right to be there, and we would show that it was safe, and it obviously was, and he very much opposed that. He also wasn't supportive of when we did have the Delta, when that came and started going through the Southeast. I set up monoclonal antibody clinics with the Regeneron, and I'll tell you, it helped a lot of people. We set them up all over the state of Florida. You never heard him talking about getting that monoclonal antibody treatment. He was always talking about restricting people, acting like somehow you can wall yourself off from society and just never contract this thing, which was not ever realistic. But it's interesting. If you go back in those early days, he was not as apocalyptic in February of 2020. Then March, he started advocating for draconian measures. But even then, he said it would be temporary. Then a few weeks later, he said, well, you're going to have lockdowns until there are no more cases. Well, that's just an indefinite lockdown, and that would have destroyed this country. And I think had Florida not stepped up when we did, I think the end would have been much worse than what ended up happening.
You set quite the example. I know your AG is looking into a probe. I don't know what that turns up. We'll see in time. But the numbers don't lie. Your population shift was substantial. You had, what, 100,000, 240, 500,000, another 500,000. It's almost 2 million people moved into Florida during that time. And a lot of that was because of what happened during COVID and the policies you pursued. Governor, thanks for coming on. We'll see where the AG probe goes next. Now, apparently Republicans have an agreement. Senators John Cornyn and Tom Tillis formally announcing that they will agree to forward the nomination of the acting AG Todd Blanche to be the Attorney General. That agreement focuses on anti-weaponization fund, also an IRS settlement. New agreement prospectively clears the path for his confirmation. I would say the odds are really good right now that he will be the Attorney General and not just acting, so that deal will be done soon.
It didn't look good on Friday, but I think everybody in Washington knew that they would work it out in some way. President Trump gave some drama over the weekend saying he was going to call it back up, but now Todd Blanche saying not going to happen. And if Tillis and Cornyn are convinced that that is true, they will vote for him, and he will likely be the Attorney General before the recess.
Yes, as they say, take the weekend, and they did, and this is what we get now.
Well, we see Cheryl Reeve wearing a shirt today in support of trans kids. Trans kids belong on the shirt. This in the aftermath of Sophie Cunningham's recent comments.
Well, at least they didn't avoid it, right? ESPN, some commentary pregame, the fight over trans athletes and fairness in women's sports intensifying within the league. Minnesota head coach from the Lynx, Cheryl Reeve, wearing that shirt on Sunday against the Indiana Fever after the Fever's Sophie Cunningham stirred up controversy last week for backing women's sports. Reeve then was asked about it and commenting on her outfit choice, as well as Cunningham after the game.
You know, I think both of us understand that we have platforms. And, we both talked about, wanting to, more than anything, educate. And there are some things that, we have in common and maybe some things you differ on, just like any issues. And I think it's how you handle things. And so, it was nice to be in person, for sure.
That was inside the arenas. Then outside the arena, Mary Catherine Ham joins me now. MK, good morning to you. Outside the arenas, you had protests for and against. So that was happening in Minneapolis on a Sunday. And then you had Riley Gaines taking a picture with Sophie Cunningham, who said last week that she doesn't believe that biological men should participate in women's sports. So, on a social issue, MK, the league is picking up the baton on this story, and I'm not quite sure where it goes, but they have breathed a lot of life into it. Go ahead.
They have, but I actually think this coach and Sophie Cunningham kind of modeled a decent way to have a conversation. What's different now is that Sophie Cunningham is being allowed to have her say, right? The WNBA and liberal activists used to live in a place where they didn't have to have this debate at all. Sophie Cunningham was asked about her political beliefs by ESPN. She said, how do you react to being called MAGA Barbie, right? Because they're assuming she's this right-wing person. She says, I don't talk about politics. I talk about this specific thing that affects my sport. Then these two women actually get together in person and have a discussion about this. It seems fairly reasonable. Reeve herself said that you have to come to common sense agreement on things that happen in Olympic sports when scholarships are at stake. So even she recognizes that there are losses to women when this gets to a higher level, which I think is conceding quite a point to Sophie Cunningham. They have this conversation. The difference now is that we can have that conversation. Sophie Cunningham was not largely canceled. The league is probably mad at her. Many liberals in the league are mad at her. But this is a 70 to 90% issue for Americans. And the media wants to reverse the two and pretend that she's in the minority. But she's speaking for a lot of people. And we didn't have that conversation for a long time. So a lot of people are coming out saying, thank you for being that other half of the conversation and having this debate.
Gotcha. So two things I'm going to queue up here. This is Sophie Cunningham writing online on Friday. She says, props to them, props to everyone who's able to be confident, be bold and courageous enough to speak their truths. I think this is a great opportunity for the WNBA. You know, they preach diversity and being inclusive, so what a great opportunity for them to actually be that. So Stephanie White is her head coach at Indiana, the Fever, okay? Caitlin Clark's on that team, too, probably the best-known player in the league. This is what she said when she was asked about it on Friday.
I don't know that I would say that I'm educated enough from a scientific standpoint. I don't ever believe that exclusion is an answer. I just don't. I do think You know, when we think about various levels of sport, various governing bodies of sport and things that go into that, like I said, I'm not educated enough at the different levels. I know growing up, I played with the boys all the time.
Had a pretty good sidestep there, and I think if she was growing up with boys playing basketball, she'd probably beat them badly. However, today there are guys who can play basketball that are bigger, better, stronger, and faster than she'll ever be. And with regard to the Trans Kids Belong t-shirt, I mean, props to her, but she never really defined what it means to belong, whether that means biological men in women's sports. And I would just say, this story will go on for some time, and I don't know if the league has the ability right now to put an end to it.
Well, and I don't know who's leading this league. You had this big dust up in Seattle where these teenage fans were harassed by a co-owner at one point. And they did apologize for that, so I think that's smart. But yeah, I don't know who's leading and who's going to make policies on this, and it is tricky for them to talk about. But Cunningham remains in a very majority position, and she's being sensitive and very common sense about it.
And this week, the building honoring Herbert Hoover reopens. That's right, Herbert Hoover, the orphan millionaire, went to Stanford and spoke Chinese to his wife so they could have private conversations. Want to know more? CBS's Lana Zak can tell you all about it. She visited Hoover's hometown.
In West Branch, Iowa, the newly reimagined Herbert Hoover Presidential Library and Museum wants to shed a fresh light on what historians consider a mixed legacy. The 31st president attended its opening in 1962, built within view of the two-room cottage where he was born.
Very humble beginning, ended up growing into one of the greatest humanitarians here in our country and the world.
Aaron Scheinblum is with the National Archives, which oversees the galleries. The new exhibits showcase Hoover's path from orphan to his single term in office.
It is such a fabulous story that most Americans don't know.
Mundy McCarty is the president and CEO of the Hoover Presidential Foundation, which funded the $20 million renovation. Hoover, an engineer by trade, came to fame by organizing the massive relief effort to feed Europe's starving population after World War I. But as president in the 1930s, he faced public backlash for policies that failed to bring relief during the Great Depression. His name became synonymous with the suffering of that time. Shantytowns were called Hoovervilles. But his name also known for one of the nation's great public works, the Hoover Dam.
These are questions we still grapple with.
Tom Schwartz is the museum's director.
He's often portrayed as this cold, aloof, uncaring individual. And what the museum is trying to get across is that no one who fed nearly 100 million people is cold-hearted or uncaring.
The problems of these times.
Part of Hoover's problem was public relations. Hoover essentially wrote his own speeches. He was the last president to do so.
A lot of people are going to hear this and think, President Hoover wasn't one of our greatest presidents. Why invest time, effort, money into this center?
Hoover's presidency, again, is really just a chapter of his entire story. Being a compassionate individual, serving others, was all that Herbert Hoover was about.
A fuller, multi-dimensional picture of a son of Iowa and the nation that he served.
Watch FlashPoint every weeknight at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. This has been a FlashPoint NewsBreak presentation.
FlashPoint isn't just a show, it's a movement. And now you can take the movement with you.
FlashPointStore.com has new merchandise.
From t-shirts to hats, mugs to more, we've got what